Hi, I'm Joe Walensky, host of the Digital Accessibility Podcast, where I talk with the people behind the progress in accessibility. And today I'm speaking with Sam Smith. Hello, Sam. How are you today?
I'm great. How about yourself, Joe?
That's doing pretty well. I am in my home office in Bellingham, Washington, which is about 80 miles north of Seattle. Where are you talking to me from?
I'm in San Francisco, Noe Valley to be specific, and it's a beautiful and sunny day today.
Well, I'm glad to have you on this. Looking forward to hearing your story about your way into accessibility. But a good place to start is if you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Of course, yeah. I currently lead accessibility at Coinbase. Coinbase is a crypto marketplace and many other features platform. And most of my day to day at Coinbase right now is managing how we accomplish shipping accessible products, really integrating more deeply into AI, sitting with our designers. I'm within our design system team and our consumer org. So a lot of my day to day is making sure we have an accessible system and all the things you can think of to make sure we shift accessibility left.
Well, it's nice to hear that you're part of the design part of the process, and we can dig into that a little bit more later. The next place to talk about would be just how you found your way to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about your background and then how you found your way into working in accessibility.
Of course, yeah. I've always been a California native. I was born and raised in Santa Cruz and went to school in Monterey. I will be honest, I have a web development background from college, but there was not a lot of accessibility mentioned in college. Mostly it was around, alt attributes and color contrast, very simple topics. And I actually was a front end engineer from the first 9 months of my career when I moved to San Francisco. I was not the most exceptional engineer before there was AI to assist me with that. And after finishing that role, I actually was just looking for a new job. And I started a company that's now called Level Access, but they were formerly called SSB. And I kind of a funny story falling in there where I applied to a lot of jobs, and one of them was at SSB, BART Group. And I had assumed that that application was for the BART Transportation Agency in San Francisco and not anything to do with accessibility. And I walked into that office for an interview, and I met Terry Fellers, who was a director of accessibility at Level Access at the time. And we did a full hands-on interview. She, asked me to turn on JAWS and interact with the webpage for the first time. It was my first time ever turning a screen reader on. And I'll be honest, I thought I had completely bombed the interview. I learned a lot in that 1 4-hour session when I was at SSB BART Group, but I left thinking there was no chance I was going to get a job there because I just didn't have an accessibility background. At the time, they had a very low ranking position called the groundwork analyst, where you would basically do the initial scoping of an audit. And I was hired at the lowest possible position there. So since I had no job, I happily accepted the offer. And it was actually a complete and amazing opportunity for me because at my time at Level Access, I was introduced to so many wonderful people with disabilities, people who I'd never been around before in my lifetime. And I just learned a lot from so many people there, whether it was like Brian Garaventa, Mike Schutte, Brian McNeely, so many other folks that were there who really showed me, what it meant to use a screen reader, what it meant to experience the web if you have a disability. I got to work in a ton of different verticals and just experience auditing something from whether it be Disney or a Penguin video game or Wells Fargo, PG&E, et cetera. I really learned a lot at that role. It was something that I found to be incredibly valuable. And I use things that I learned there every day. I'm happy to go deeper into the journey, Joe, if you want to follow all the way to Coinbase, or I can pause and see if you have other questions.
Well, it, your journey is not unusual at all. Well, I'm toward the tail end of my career now, but I started out in engineering, but went on many different paths to find my way into accessibility. That's kind of what this is all about. But it certainly seems like it was serendipitous that you found that early employment the way that you did, as you know, a great launch pad into this profession.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I think it really helped me learn more and push me to want to be more on the in-house product side instead of the consultancy side. But it was really valuable for me to be at Level Access, and I think the lived experience and being around a multitude of people with different abilities really taught me, why accessibility is valuable, how to achieve that successfully, and inspired me to want to be a bigger part of the community.
Yeah, and it's certainly a place where you'll have the resources available to to fill in and learn the things that you need to learn. What progressed after that? Did you continue on into some other positions or end up where you're at now?
Yeah, so I have one more stop between my current position at Coinbase. I was very fortunate to get hired by Tim Hone at Workday. Workday was, I would say, in the beginning of its accessibility journey, or at least the middle half or middle beginning. They had a couple employees doing accessibility, but mostly it was like a PM management focused and one kind of small engineering team. So I joined as the first what they called accessibility subject matter expert at Workday. I had a variety of roles there over the 4 years, and I think we really transformed Workday from a definite weakness in its accessibility journey to huge strength. When I joined, like I mentioned, there were two folks, and I was the third. And when I left, we had almost 30 people there. It was amazing to see the transformation, and especially accessibility go from something that was considered pretty much an afterthought to being like a major sales driver. Workday being a B2B, well, the time when I was there, right, we landed huge contracts that had primary clauses around accessibility. And we really saw that shift go from, does this really matter to, yes, it definitely does. And it's actually driving core revenue for the business. So that was a great stop for me as well. I'm happy to go into more detail around that role as too.
Well, I think it's just interesting what you were just talking about, where there was actually a pull through about that, where external forces were definitely indicating that accessibility was going to be really important. Not all organizations experience that. It may be that accessibility is understood to be important, but it's always a little bit better when it's some customer facing, client facing information is causing that to accelerate the way that you found at Workday.
Yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate. I think a lot of the B2C companies, and I think I may have, or B2B, as I should have correctly said, have that larger revenue drive, especially if they're talking to an institution, educational, some kind of government agency, those types of things. There is a little stronger push on the revenue side, but I think any accessibility professional should think about, what does their 60-second elevator pitch look like when they're talking internally or externally, and be able to configure that 60 seconds to meet the person you're speaking to's expectations. Because I think that's something that will make you super successful in this industry, is communicating to people the way they want to be communicated to, and pulling on the strings that they value the most. That's not always going to be the case, but I think that's a great place to start.
That's a really good insight and suggestion, and one I would agree with, the ability to map the activities that you're involved with the important directions that the organization wants to take. Is then the next stop the one that you're at now?
Yeah, so I was at Workday until 2022, from 2018 to 2022. And then in April of 2022, I shifted over to Coinbase. So next month, I'll be celebrating 4 years there as well. And that journey has been really exciting. I definitely joined Coinbase in a more beginning stage than even Workday. So being able to see the whole program build out, and be able to grow and meet the expectations that we had has been really great experience here.
Well, you mentioned it growing. I just happen to be have been a Coinbase customer for a long time, and so like I recognize how much of an evolution that product and services had over, well, actually not very long time at all, but there's been a lot of changes. So maybe talk a little bit about what that's been like. It seems like there's been a bit of acceleration in the design and development. How did that affect your work in accessibility?
Yeah, completely. Happy to talk about what's changing currently. Historically, what I would say is Coinbase has always been a very fast moving pace. And at least through my experience in tech, we definitely move at a pace that feels more like a startup. And I think that flexed my ability to understand how do I reach out to product teams that maybe don't have a 6 month window of shipping a feature. So things have got to move a little bit more sporadically. They've got to be more flexible. Things need to be self-serve. One of the real foundations, I believe, when you can, is the design system does so much of the heavy lifting for us at Coinbase. We have a high 90% adoption rate, and we have a really accessible system. So pushing that forward, communicating why it matters, and then even pushing engineering teams to say, if you don't adopt this specific component, you're going to have to build in the accessibility yourself, is such a strong selling point there. In terms of where we currently are, I just was speaking at AxCon about how we use AI for accessibility at Coinbase. And I mean, we could talk about that for ages right now, but the number one thing I'm seeing right now is the empowerment it's providing me and the other accessibility professionals at Coinbase is really valuable. Being able to actually ship code that's accessible, make fixes when I need to, ship entire features, which I'd love to highlight our high contrast mode feature in a second as well, and really like push the boundaries of not just meeting the minimum, but kind of exceeding it, has been a great value that I've seen AI deliver, and specifically in the agents that are writing code for us. Being able to train, a single agent on accessibility has been a win for us because the scale at which if we have one agent that we believe is writing good, accessible design system based code, that's really going to multiply our effort. And I think we're going to see that across the web is when AI is used properly, you are going to see wins coming from accessibility specifically. But I'll pause there if you wanted to ask anything else on that front.
Well, I love that you're talking about the design system being so important in the overall process. I found that to be a good way to have a successful project myself. But also, I know that a lot of times within a design department, that accessibility can have tension with other aspects of the research and design project. I was just wondering, if how things are organized where you're at, so that there's a smooth flow of accessibility being built into that design system.
Sure. I mean, one, it's really nice that I'm in the design org, so it's my strongest org, I would say. Two, I think when I spoke back about that 60-second elevator pitch, right, when I'm talking to a designer, the things I try to harp on are, user first, high craft, accessibility delivers high craft. We have tons of users with a variety of abilities on Coinbase, and we need to serve them all. So if you produce a product that's not accessible, you are producing a lower craft, a lower quality experience. And then being able to provide some metrics around that, those types of things always go great with designers. In terms of the process, we can always talk about education from, design inclusion courses that we provide our designers to, we have a channel in Slack where every consumer feature runs through that I try to monitor. I try to always communicate. We have short checklists for designers so that we keep things high level for them. We have, user research from Fable, one of our partners that we love, that we can pipe back to them to show, when a user might be struggling. Something I also try to communicate to designers is that multiple paths of success is something I really advocate for. A good example of that, right, is like a date picker to me. someone may want to type the date input in, someone may want to choose from the calendar. The use case may vary depending on what they're doing. And then it can be more complex. I think Airbnb's wheel that you can choose flexible dates in is a great example of multiple paths of success, where the designers built something that's visually very pleasing. They still provided three different ways to succeed. And I think in those instances, what I try to communicate to design is we should make every flow accessible and all the paths accessible. But the reality is, depending on the user and depending on maybe what assistive technology they use, they may just flat out prefer one method over the other. And giving that flexibility to the designer, I think, allows them to think about making something creative, but also making something that works well for a variety of people, and allowing them to not feel like accessibility is a limitation, but an invitation to think about more than one person. I actually think is one of the most successful things we've done with our designers. As new people on board, obviously, the discussion needs to begin again. And sometimes you feel like you're saying the same thing twice, but being able to enable those people, I think, is going to create a designer that's just better at accessibility, better at design for life. And I've had a lot of those messages over my years of people leaving Workday or Coinbase and telling me, hey, this thing you said to me has actually stuck with me the whole time, and I'm going to carry it on. And I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of being in a program like this or being in accessibility. So that's typically how we'll handle it. I'm happy to go into more nuance as well.
Oh, that's great. There are a lot of really good nuggets in there. In fact, I'm going to listen to this again for my own benefit. But thanks for sharing all of that.
Of course.
And I think we're caught up to where you're at today. What about looking forward into the future? Are there any particular things in your work that you're excited about, or elements of accessibility that you're considering? Kind of, how are you looking forward to the coming months and years?
Yeah, of course. I'll pause on AI for now, but we can always circle back to it because I feel like we've talked about it a little. But something I'm actually really excited about is, well, we just shipped a feature for high contrast mode that enables people to turn on either a toggle, or it will just auto turn on based on their settings if they have high contrast mode turned on, say, their iPhone or their laptop. Pushing past kind of, just meeting a 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio into that like enhancement, personalization experience is really what I'm the most excited about with accessibility. And I think, there are a lot of things coming our way that will enable that more deeply. But I've always felt like personalization is kind of the next frontier for accessibility, in my opinion. At Workday, we worked with Amazon, and one of the things the PM for accessibility there told me that I won't ever forget is that on the Kindle, the number one feature was text size change, which obviously should be expected for reading a book. But I think I have tried to carry that through, which is the most accessible experience will be something that flexes to meet whatever that particular user's needs are, whether they're low vision, or someone who wears glasses, or an elderly person that wants to change text size or change contrast, or maybe they have vertigo and they want to make sure reduced motion enables them to experience the joyfulness of an app, but also still in a way they prefer. My hope is that we continue to go down that path at Coinbase, where the experience you are able to configure your experience either with your settings on your device or with some features within Coinbase that provide you with just a better experience. That's what I'm hoping to continue to do. We're looking to ship some reduced motion features in the future, and then expand on those kind of preference styles in the future, maybe even with something like a more simple version of Coinbase, or how just basically toggling the app to meet exactly how you'd like to experience it. So those are the things I'm the most excited for in the next, say, 6 to 12 months.
Well, you definitely have a full roadmap. You did briefly mention AI. That's something that you wanted to comment about. I think a lot of people, well, in all types of disciplines, are considering how that affects the work that you're doing. What does that mean to you within your organization, and specifically for accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to be an AI first organization, and I want to echo that within our accessibility program. in terms of how users experience the web and a mobile app, I do think that we might experience some kind of paradigm shift with AI where people are talking or typing to some form of AI and it's actually interacting with the apps, and there's very little interaction with physical individual apps. Now, that may not happen, but I do think we could expect some form of paradigm shift to occur with the use of AI. So I think being able to communicate in an accessible manner with whatever it may be, an MCP for the AI or et cetera, I think is something that we need to at least account for as we continue to build. And then internally, how we work, my goal is to really be able to harness a team of agents. So we may have an agent that writes code. We might have an agent that performs a design review or educates a particular person on accessibility, reviews a PR, or maybe does some form of automation scan that evaluates a product that's in production and comes back with findings. I think we are going to see those types of things where one person manages multiple agents. Really, what I want to see on that front is two things. One, that the agents can perform their tasks in the most accessible manner possible. And two, really something that I'm, fortunate not to have to deal with currently, except for being colorblind, is those agents being very accessible to all people with disabilities. So something I think that's really important and is typically the last thing to be considered is the actual tools that are used to achieve those goals, right? We need to be making those accessible. We need to be uplifting everyone, not just making things more accessible, but also allowing anyone to be able to use those tools. So that's really where I'm focused right now. Obviously, I don't have a lot of control over the accessibility of the individual tool, but when we build things internally at Coinbase, we consider that as well.
Well, so again, even more great insights about what you're doing at Coinbase in your practice. So thanks so much, Sam, for participating in this. It was great to hear about your story and all the things that you're involved in, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you in person someday.
I would love that, Joe. Thank you for having me on, and it's been a pleasure chatting.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Of course.